This is the lore accurate Titan build. We have three main goals for this build. One-shot GM level champions with Syntheseps and Consecration. Have near infinite transcendence on Prismatic thanks to Ergo Sum and our abilities. And to be as aggressive as possible in endgame content with high survivability. The best part of it all, no class item is necessary. But if you have one, it just makes this build even better. Let's get started. Let's begin by going over the two exotics that we need for this build to function. First up, we got Syntheseps. This exotic is going to increase your melee damage by 165% while you're surrounded by 3 or more enemies. If you only have the exotic gauntlets, that's perfectly fine for this build. The footage currently playing is me only using the Syntheseps, no class item, and I'm still able to wreck champions just as efficiently. But if you do have a good exotic class item with Syntheseps, that will of course be a direct upgrade compared to just running the arms. Some good class item perks that I recommend are Spirit of the Assassin, which makes you invisible whenever you get a melee kill or finisher, and also Spirit of Inmost Light, which will reduce the cooldown of your abilities whenever one of them is used. So Syntheseps, whether it be the gauntlets or the class item, is going to be the main damage increase for Consecration and our melees. It is the thing that allows us to one-shot champions. The other exotic that we need for this build to work is Ergo Sum. This sword is going to fill our Transcendent energy very quickly whenever we get kills with it thanks to its exotic perk, Transcendent Duelist. You're going to want to focus on killing all the smaller and weaker enemies with the Ergo Sum so that you can become Transcendent as quickly as possible. The Catalyst is a must for this sword, as it will basically allow us to have infinite ammo. All you need to do for this Catalyst to work is throw your Transcendent Grenade at an enemy, and you'll get anywhere from 3 to 9 sword ammo. Now, moving on to the RNG aspect of this sword, the random roll that I recommend you farm. The two best rolls for this build will both have Arc Conductor, but you can opt for either the Wave Frame or the Caster Frame. Arc Conductor will grant 50% damage resistance to incoming arc damage. It will also chain lightning to enemies, which will help even more towards gaining Transcendent energy, and the damage from this chain lightning is not that bad. When it comes to the frame, this more or less comes down to personal preference. If you're going with the wave frame, just use your powered swing into a group of enemies, and then follow up with the air attack to close the distance with another target. You'll be flying around the map and taking out adds very quickly. The caster is also good, and it'll let you take out enemies that are further away, and it'll be better for damage on a single target. Like I said, just whatever you prefer, or maybe in this case, just whichever one you have. And those are the exotics. Now let's take a look at the subclass. First up, aspects. We of course want to run Consecration. This will be the bulk of your damage and allow you to one-shot champions and deal high boss damage. You'll get the best effect out of Consecration when there are many enemies grouped up near your target. This is because all of the ignitions will go off at once, dealing a ton of damage to the enemy. Knockout is the other aspect, and this will grant you 40% increased melee damage when active. It'll also grant a health bump whenever you get a melee kill, and it'll also make you amplified. Moving on to our abilities, our melee is Frenzied Blade. This is crucial because it gives us 3 melee charges, allowing us to spam Consecration. For our grenade, I think Shackle is the best. This will not only suspend enemies, helping us deal with Unstoppables and barrier champs, but it'll also generate a ton of Darkness Transcendent energy whenever it hits a group of adds. Next up, our class ability will be Thruster. This plays both into our aggressiveness, and it'll also synergize really well with the class item mod that I'll discuss later. Before we move on, let me mention the Transcendent Grenade for a moment. This thing jolts and suspends, and those deal with overloads and unstoppables respectively. The suspend is also useful against barriers to prevent them from putting up their shield. So this one grenade effectively deals with all 3 champion types. If that isn't the best, then I don't know what is. Now for our super. I think there are really 2 good options when it comes to GM Nightfalls and non-boss, raid, or dungeon encounters for the super. These are going to be Blade Fury and Glacial Quake. Both of these will help build Darkness Transcendence energy very quickly whenever you use them. Glacial Quake will be best for damage because of all the shatters that happen, but Blade Fury will be best for utility because when that super ends, you get all 3 melee charges back, feeding into your Consecration spam even more. I've mostly used Blade Fury in my solo runs, but I've also used Glacial Quake, and that is really good as well. If I were you, I would just try both out and then see which one you like the best. Now let's move on to our fragments. First up, we got Facet of Protection. This gives 15% damage resistance while you are surrounded. It is a must-have for an aggressive playstyle, and there's really no reason not to use it. Next up, we want Facet of Purpose. Picking up an Orb of Power will give you an elemental buff based on your equipped super. For Blade Fury, this is Woven Mail, which is 45% damage resistance for 5 seconds. For Glacial Quake, this is going to be 1 stack of Frost Armor, which is 4.5 damage resistance for 10 seconds, and this can go up to 10 stacks. The next fragment we want is Facet of Ruin. This is just really good to help with our ignitions from Consecration, and if you're running Glacial Quake, it'll help with that shatter damage. You then want to run Facet of Courage. This will make your Consecration do 10% more damage to enemies afflicted with the Darkness debuff. This does include Suspend, so we're almost always going to be getting this benefit. The final fragment is Facet of Dawn. This will let us become Radiant whenever we deal melee damage. Radiant will let us break us barrier shields with our heavy, so that's why it's good to have, and you also get that damage buff to your weapons. You might ask, why not Radiant Orbs on the artifact? Well, that's because Solar Fulmination came out with Act 2. So, let's talk about the artifact. First column, just run whatever champion mod you need for the given activity. In the second column, run Overcharged Armory. This will make it so that all weapons with these listed origin traits are always overcharged in activities with that modifier. That is a free 25% damage increase to your weapon. The other mod in this column is really up to personal preference. In the third column, we want to run Overload Sword. This not only grants overload to your ergo sum, but it also makes it overcharged no matter what in activities with that modifier. I then like to run Threaded Blast because we do actually make a good bit of tangles, and I like to use a Strand Primary. In the fourth column, we want to run Blade Stamina. This will simply increase your ammo for ergo sum, and if we didn't already have infinite ammo with a catalyst, we definitely do now with this mod. The next mod you want to run is Galvanic Armor. This grants 30% damage resist while amplified, and we are amplified all the time thanks to Knockout. Finally, we want to run Solar Fulmination. This will increase the damage and size of ignitions. In the final column, this is a pretty easy choice: Shield Crush and Transference. Shield Crush will increase ability damage by 25% while you have these specified buffs, and you'll get these buffs whenever you pick up an Orb of Power thanks to Facet of Purpose. You'll also get faster recharge on your abilities from Shield Crush. Transference is a straight up 10% damage increase to your abilities while Transcendent. The second part of this mod is not really noticed during gameplay since we are using Consecration while Transcendent, not our weapons. And that does it for the artifact. Let's talk armor. For your stats, go 100 resilience first, as always, and then go for as high strength as possible, and then go for discipline. On our helmet, run a siphon mod that matches the sword damage, so this should be arc. This will generate orbs on double kills with the ergo sum. Then put on heavy ammo finder for your heavy weapon. On our arms, the first mod we want is heavy handed. This will let our melee kills create orbs. The other two mods you want on your arms are Momentum Transfer and Impact Induction. These help with ability cooldowns because using your grenade will reduce the cooldown of your melee and vice versa. On our chest, we want to use Lucent Blades since we're using a sword. This will simply allow you to use your powered swing on your ergo sum more often. Then for the other two mods, just run 2 different resist mods, and this will vary based on whatever damage you're taking in an activity. For example, in the Disgraced, that was mostly arc and void damage, so I ran those resist mods. On our legs, put on Better Already. This regenerates your health whenever you pick up an Orb of Power. The health regen stops whenever you take damage. Next up, Recuperation. This gives you a health bump whenever you pick up an Orb of Power. These two mods are crucial for the survivability and aggressiveness that we want to achieve in tough content. The final mod on the legs that I like to run is a Scavenger mod, preferably matching your heavy, since remember, we already basically have infinite sword ammo, but you can run a Surge mod if you want. Finally, we have our class item. One of the mods you want to run is Reaper. Whenever you use your thruster, your next weapon kill will generate an orb. This, combined with the siphon mod on your helmet, means you'll be making a ton of orbs with the ergo sum. The next mod you want is Powerful Attraction. Using your thruster will collect all nearby orbs instantly. This mod is going to be the center of all of our Orb of Power interactions. It is very, very helpful for staying alive in tight situations because when you're weak, you just use your thruster and you collect all nearby orbs, instantly healing you and granting an elemental buff from Facet of Purpose. And since we have a little bit of energy left on our class item, I opted to use Healthy Finisher. This heals you whenever you finish an enemy, adding yet another layer of survivability to this build. With armor fully covered, let's talk about weapons that are not the ergo sum. For our kinetic slot, there is a lot of freedom. Most people will run a champion breaking weapon, but you can also run a 1-2 punch shotgun if you want, or a rocket sidearm, or maybe a sniper. You can actually afford to run double special because Ergo Sum gets a lot of ammo on its own. I would recommend running a darkness element weapon in this slot though, just in case you need some extra darkness transcendent energy. I really like to use the Imminence as my primary. This is because it's strand and it has the perk Pugilist, so it helps me get my melee back quicker and it builds darkness energy. For our heavy, I do think grenade launchers are the best for damage, but you can run a rocket if you want, or linear fusion, or even a machine gun. Consecration carries most of our damage, so you do have a lot of freedom here. And now that weapons are done, we've basically covered everything. I do have to mention 2 obstacles with this build that aren't really exclusive to Prismatic Titan, but that you should still be aware of. Firstly, Tormentors. Your Consecration won't do great against Tormentors, so you want to run a precision-based weapon like a sniper, linear fusion, or a machine gun whenever you come across those. Secondly, long-range bosses. You're not going to be able to melee bosses like the Witness, of course, so if you intend to keep this build on during those encounters, your weapons are really going to need to carry your damage. But I think those are really the only 2 flaws with this build. Now, we've almost reached the end. Let's just recap all the benefits that you get with this build. Survivability. You get 20% damage resist while Transcendent, 45% damage resist with Woven Mail, 15% damage resist while Surrounded, 50% damage resist to incoming arc damage while you have Arc Conductor from Ergo Sum, 30% damage resist while Amplified, 30% damage resist from 100 resilience, 15% damage resist from each resist mod, and 25% DR while in the Consecration animation. Altogether, this gives us 94% DR for our Guardian while we have all of the buffs applied. Plus, we get all that health regen from picking up Orbs of Power. Melee damage. Syntheseps gives us 165% more melee damage. Knockout is 40%. Shield Crush is 25%, Facet of Courage is 10%, Transference is 10%. So altogether, this is a 5.6 times damage increase to your base Consecration. And this doesn't even account for Solar Fulmination, which will increase our ignition damage. Swing your sword, smash your hammer, and never die. That is the build. And that is it for the video. I can confidently say this build goes above and beyond in every single piece of content in the game. I'll end quickly by saying thank you for all the support on the recent videos and with the channel. With that being said, have a good day.